Welcome in, everybody. Another week of the college football season is upon us. Peter Atticus, Simone Eli joining you for this week's edition of Auburn Football Head to Head. Of course, the Tigers preparing for a home matchup against Missouri this weekend. But Peter, before we really break down that matchup, let's talk about the state of the state a little bit, because it's a big week for you. You exclusively spoke with Auburn's athletic director, John Cohen, this week, kind of about the state of Hugh Freeze and kind of where they're at right now on the Plains. Of course, we know there was a lot of changeover this past weekend when it comes to college football. Several guys out on jobs, fired, no bigger than James Franklin, of course, at Penn State. And then you start to wonder how else we're going to see that from throughout the entire college football landscape and in the SEC maybe. And give us your thoughts on your conversation with John first before we really talk about this game.
Yeah, obviously it was, interesting just to get an idea from him, his thought process behind what could go into making a change, what his evaluation of the program is right now. I asked him point blank, does he expect Hugh Freeze to be Auburn's head coach next season? And his answer, it's very kind of classic AD answer. He had this kind of long analogy about his car where he said something along the lines of, if I don't know if I'll go outside today and my car will start or not. If my car doesn't start enough, then maybe I'll make decisions about my car, but I don't think.
Okay, can we all just say really quick that I read that and I was like, okay, I've never heard that analogy. I can kind of get what he's trying to say, meaning, there's uncertainty there. What was the tone of his voice when he was delivering that? And then there was never say never. Did that come out of his mouth, those words?
Yes, he did say kind of a never say never attitude. I think what he was trying to get across is that, look, at the current moment, they're not, a change is not something he's thinking about. Firing Hugh Freeze, not something he's thinking about. That's at least what he is saying. But I think he's saying never say never. And, even my car might not stop. It's to say that's not that can't change, which I think obviously he's covering himself to if something does happen next week or in 2 weeks or at the end of the season, whenever. I think he was leaving the door open for things can change. But, his overall point was, a coaching change. That's not what's on my mind right now. I think that's what he's trying to do. I mean, look, I don't know that any athletic director is going to get on the phone with the beat writer on the record and just say, hey, we're firing the coach tomorrow.
I get it. I mean,
so I think he answered in a way to where it can kind of, he can still cover himself either way it goes.
So I have a question, and maybe I'm just out of touch when I say this. And if people want to, have their opinions about it, it's fine. But is Hugh Freeze's seat that hot? And I'm not to say that there isn't pressure. I know that there's pressure. They haven't won an SEC game. They've also played, 3 really good SEC teams. They do have 3 wins to start the year, and there have been good things. There have been bad things, and then there's been a lot of what the hell are the SEC official doing things, and they have kind of resulted in, I don't know, I would certainly say it resulted in the loss in Oklahoma. So that certainly didn't help. And then, listen, did Auburn do what they needed to do down the stretch to come back to beat Georgia? No. But if anyone who's ever played sports knows anything about just patterns and trajectory and momentum, and when it gets killed, what the life is sucked out of you. And again, it's his job to get it fixed. I'm not trying to make excuses. The problem is these people aren't robots. You don't just go out there and do the same thing every single drive. It's hard to come back from that. Is he under as much hey, this is going to happen in the middle of the season? I mean, it kind of just seems insane to me, to be honest with you.
I think all of those things are going to be taken into consideration when it comes to the evaluation of Hugh Freeze and the future of the Hugh Freeze tenure going forward. John Cohen, he was talking about the things that he uses to evaluate the success of a head coach. And he talked about, obviously results on the field is a big part of it, is the program improving in that metric. Talk about recruiting, they're bringing in good players, they're bringing in the right type of players. He talked about the locker room. How strong is the locker room? Does the locker room still believe in the coach? Obviously, Hugh Freeze done a really good job recruiting. He's created an awesome roster. It's probably the most talented the roster has been in quite a while. The locker room has, for the most part, I think at least has stuck with them throughout this whole time. I think there's questions as to how much longer that will continue, especially when you look at the second half of the Georgia game. There was obviously the situation with Damari Alston leaving the program this week, but I think when it comes to those respects, when it comes to the non-result, aspects of the program, I think Cohen and a lot of the people in charge are satisfied with Hugh Freeze. What I've always said, though, when it comes to the pressure on him is, Hugh Freeze has gotten a lot of support at Auburn. He's been here. I mean, I think that, he wouldn't be able to build these rosters if he didn't have the support from the people, the money people, the people who have power around Auburn. But I also think it's fair to say that, or fair to question how much longer is that support going to continue if the results don't change eventually. Like, he's been put in a position where he's winning. And don't get me wrong, like you mentioned, there's been things that haven't gone Auburn's way, whether it's officiating, whether it's just bad luck. But eventually the results need to change. And I mean, that starts with the head coach.
Right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And like you said, in winning heals a lot. Winning fixes a lot. So if there were one of those other intangible type things that maybe weren't up to par necessarily, if you're getting it done on the field, that's always kind of the benchmark of success, literally and literally. So I get it. I mean, listen, this is the SEC. I understand everyone has a job to do. There's no doubt about that. You mentioned Damari Allison. What is the latest on what that situation was, or have they really peeled back the curtain on what all that really looked like? I know there was some back and forth on social media about what was the truth behind that situation. What do you know?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's as much animosity there as maybe there's been made out to believe. Well, at least I think from people at Auburn toward Damari Allison. I mean, that's at least what's been communicated. I think obviously a lot of his teammates have come out in support of him. His teammates, really liked him. He was a team captain. I mean, he was voted as team captain by the players. I think when it comes down to what happened, I think, when I was talking to John Cohen yesterday, he talked about how, landscape of college football in 2025, you have things like, red shirts and wanting to preserve another year of eligibility and, agents and making money. Those are all things that get taken into consideration. And I think players, because they're in that same situation as well, they understand when another player, has a situation like that. And they're not going to, a lot of fans may look at it as, oh, you're quitting on the team. But I don't think that's how players and people on the inside look at it.
Yeah, it's always a little bit different.
But, Auburn decided, they decided that he wasn't going to be with the program anymore. And I think on one hand, it makes Auburn's running back depth really thin. And then on the other hand, you're also losing a captain.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. And I think that it makes a lot of sense that things are not always exactly what it appears like, especially how things play out on social media nowadays. When you look at this game against Missouri, it's going to be a night game there at Jordan-Hare Stadium on Saturday as Missouri comes in, a top 20 ranked team, of course. Just had a close loss against Alabama at home. I think we know that was kind of a prove-it game for Missouri in terms of they went into it undefeated, 5-0, lost to Alabama in what could have gone their way. I do think that the score maybe is a little bit deceiving as to why really the game being in the Tide's favor for quite a bit down the stretch. But regardless, this is a huge opportunity for Auburn to get in the win column. Get in the win column in the SEC, and to beat what appears like one of the better SEC teams this season, which is crazy to say about Missouri, but listen, it's 2025, and you never know nowadays. So what do you make of just this matchup and kind of what this Tiger matchup will be?
Yeah, I think it's going to be another really tough game for Auburn, but I think it's going to be another really winnable game for Auburn as well. I think they match up talent-wise with Missouri, maybe better than they did against, I would say probably better than they did against Georgia or against Oklahoma or Texas A&M.
Yeah.
The thing that concerns me most about this matchup for Auburn, and I think we saw this in the Alabama game, is that Missouri pass rush is really, really good. And, I mean, Auburn has had trouble with protecting Jackson Arnold this season. They only allowed 1 sack against Georgia, but combined 14 against Oklahoma and Texas.
And Georgia was notably not the greatest pass rushing team, which is kind of bizarre to say under Kirby Smart, but yeah.
Right, exactly. And I think Missouri is going to be a big step up compared to what they faced against Georgia, which that, like you said, that sentence is kind of wild to say.
It is. I felt like it was weird all week saying that. Yeah.
Right. I think that's going to be a challenge, this offense against Missouri's defense. I kind of like the matchup of Auburn's defense against Missouri's offense. Ahmad Hardy, obviously a really good back, but wasn't as effective against Alabama, who I would say is probably the best defense Missouri's played so far. And Auburn has one of the best rushing defenses in the country. So it's going to be a tough game. And obviously a win would be huge for Auburn. But I think it's just going to come down to, making the plays offensively that we haven't seen them make.
Prior to the situation there at Auburn, what I'm mean by the situation against Georgia, this team just came out really, 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 really on fire. I mean, I felt like for once, the staff was committed to running the ball for starters. There was a lot of votes going down in the ground game. It was successful, and it was like, okay, here something's been uncovered. I think every single time you and I have spoken, it was like, hey, is Auburn going to commit to the run to get it done there? And then you throw it to 8, and listen, I think I could run that offense pretty well, to be honest with you. Hand it off, throw it to 8, like you're good. So prior to the situation with, I'm talking about the fumble or the not fumble, it seemed like they had maybe found a little bit of something. Do you think that there's something that you're seeing? I mean, that's like almost 300 yards, total yards, but I just felt like maybe only 140 on the ground. But it just seemed like, I don't know, it just felt like it. Maybe it was like me and like being delusional, but it just seemed like they had found something there in the ground game, even if they didn't have a ton of people there. It's like there was something there. Even the QB, like just for Jackson Arnold himself to run the ball. It seemed like, hey, take the decision out of his hands, called runs, and it worked well. Any thoughts on what that could look like moving forward for this offense?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I thought the game plan was actually really, really good on Saturday. I mean, even in the second half when the offense kind of stagnated, I didn't think it was the work of the game plan or the play calling. I think there were some plays, though, that were not made. I think the first half especially was just an example of what this version of Auburn's offense looks like at its best. I think maybe you could say they could have taken more shots down the field. They had the one deep shot to Eric Singleton that got overthrown, but we didn't see them kind of utilize Cam Coleman as much as a deep threat like you were talking about. But I think, this is the team that I think that it's best when it's run first, it's using the run to set up the pass. Yeah. And, you lose Damari Alston, but Jeremiah Cobb has kind of been the go-to guy at that spot recently. I think Omar Mapson, the true freshman, from Auburn High School, is going to take on a bigger role now because of that. I think the game plan will be similar to what it was against Georgia, because I think it worked. I mean, it's just about keeping the same execution energy for all 4 quarters.
Yeah, and it is interesting because I guess no, he went for 55 yards, Jackson Arnold. So I mean, it's a decent little situation there for them to keep people honest, keep your defense honest when it comes to, hey, just having to make up for that guy and keep somebody in the middle there. And I think it always presents opportunity. So listen, I'm not sitting here trying to call Auburn's plays by any means, but I do think that there was some success early on in that game and what was scripted that was going well until the officials took the game out of their hands. And so anyways, I don't want to be biased, so we'll see how things go. Nonetheless, Peter, when you look at this game, kind of what you think the score might be, which way is it going to go? Missouri, Auburn, what do you think? A night game there on the Plains, which you always know is a great atmosphere.
It's tough. I mean, it's going to be another really close game. I think it's going to be another really good atmosphere. One thing about Auburn fans that I've learned since being here, it really doesn't matter how the season's going, what the record is. I mean, they're always going to show up, and it's always
a party. It's a party.
Especially Jordan Hare at night. It's always going to, it's always going to be a great atmosphere. But, if you look at recent years, Auburn hasn't always taken advantage of those atmospheres, though. Yeah. And even these close games Auburn has had chances to win, we haven't seen them do that. So it's tough. But I do kind of like the spot for Auburn here. I think, as much as Auburn's kind of coming off an emotional loss and the letdown, I think Missouri kind of is too. They had their biggest game of the year, a home game where they fall kind of in a close game to Alabama. And I do think this Auburn team matches up well as long as this team does stay together and the energy is where it needs to be and they're ready to play against another talented team. But I like the matchup for Auburn, and I think this is a great opportunity to finally win one of these close games. So I think, this pick is really, this is not something I've thought about much. That's something that's kind of come to me in real time. But I think I'll lean Auburn in this spot.
Yeah, I do too. I think, maybe a 24-21 deal down the stretch, something that doesn't really always look pretty, but at the end of the day, they get the dub. And I do think that it could be the start of a turn for the Tigers. I mean, it's Missouri, then it's at Arkansas, at home against Kentucky, at Vanderbilt. I think that there's a lot of opportunity here, but I think you got to get that first one, kind of get the monkey off your back, be able to breathe a little bit easier, if you're Hugh Freeze and company, if there is that type of pressure, that of course, no one's going to put more pressure on Coach Freeze than himself. That's what SEC coaches do. That's why they get paid the money that they do. And so we'll see what it looks like. But listen, it's going to be a fun one, no doubt. Week 8 of the season, which you can believe it. Man, we're already Halloween's right around the corner. It'll be bowl season before we know it, and then the off season. So, Peter, it flies by when you're having fun, man. Appreciate you. Great reporting this week. Good stuff there with John Cohen. Appreciate the insight for viewers and readers all throughout the state. So, thank you, sir, and we'll see you next week.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Brought to you by Alabama Beef Farmers and Ranchers.